A lunch earlier today with some senior Democrats in the foreign policy world, and they said to me that among the swing state voters, issue number one, the economy, issue number two, they are hearing is foreign policy. Is this an election where foreign policy could actually matter?
If so, the candidates are the last to learn this fact. So far, you can make a case, and you begin to see this in various commentary. Walter Russell Mead and others are using the term World War III. Because we have two major regional wars already underway in Ukraine and in Israel to the west and to the north. And so far as I can tell, the candidates aren't interested. What are they talking about? I'm not going to tax tips. I'm not going to tax Social Security. I'm going to cap credit card. I'm not going to tax overtime. Small ball.
To be fair, though, I have heard, and I've listened to a fair share of my Donald Trump rallies, not as many as in 2016 when I would go to them, but he's brought up, in his words, that Joe Biden is going to get us into World War III. He's been saying that for a while. The question would be that you're going to have this speech at the UN by President Biden tomorrow, and it was a year ago almost exactly that his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, September 29th, 2023, said this. Take a listen.
The Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades. Now, challenges remain. Iran's nuclear weapons program, the tensions between Israelis and Palestinians. But the amount of time that I have to spend on crisis and conflict in the Middle East today compared to any of my predecessors going back to 9/11 is significantly reduced.
And then he spent the next year worried about the Middle East because the October 7th attacks came.
And the Wall Street Journal says that when he included that sentence about how calm the Middle East is in his foreign affairs article, he later took it out on the online version.
Well, you know, politicians have been known to change things every once in a while. Again, does the American people hold the Biden administration responsible for foreign policy? Do they feel that sense of disorder?
I don't think so yet. We still have, by our mentality, the protection of 2 tranquil and weak neighbors and 2 broad oceans. But the world has a way of getting into our heads eventually. And if the American people really think this is a tranquil time out there, they're not paying attention. This is the most ominous time since the Second World War.
You said that. There was a New York Times piece about that. Does it surprise you that Donald Trump is not making that more of an issue?
No, because what the American people want from foreign policy is as little of it as possible. They just don't want to think about it. They'd much rather worry about the economy or cultural issues in this country for the animating both parties' bases. Foreign policy is off-putting to Americans until, you know, Trotsky is supposed to have said, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. Foreign policy eventually is interested in the American people.
What does Kamala Harris's, or what are Kamala Harris's options? I thought the Wall Street Journal very fairly laid it out. She says she's going to stand up to authoritarians and says that Donald Trump is weak to authoritarians. And the facts speak for themselves. Authoritarians have been on the rise over the past 4 years. They were in check under Donald Trump. Is there a danger, if the October surprise is a foreign policy event, of people all of a sudden asking, do I want not Kamala Harris, the joyful candidate, not Kamala Harris with lots of promises of economic revival and women's reproductive freedom, do I want her as the commander-in-chief?
The commander-in-chief who was part of an administration that for 4 years now has seen real inflation-adjusted defense spending decline.
And that is not a choice people want to make. Last point I'm going to get you on before we look back into the Donald Trump rally, and I think this is a question that we're going to have to look at over the next 45 days, and you've made this point in your speeches. At what point do the American people start watching who's on stage, both at the Donald Trump rallies, the Kamala Harris rallies? We have taken both. Fair's fair. The ratings that we get for the Donald Trump rally is higher. They say to themselves, do I want this person in my living room for the next 4 years?
That's a good question, because thanks to television and thanks to our inflated expectations of the presidency, we have an unusually intimate relationship with these people. Fred Allen, a great early TV person, said, television enables you to have in your living room people you wouldn't have in your living room. And that's what it is, I'm afraid, with Mr. Trump.
You think that same rule applies to Ms. Harris?
No.
People don't mind it at this point.
That's right, because she's full of joy. The question is, does too much joy, like too much chocolate, become too much?
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.